Welcome to Navigating Aging, and my name is Cheryl Matthew. And let's let the person in. So I'm Cheryl Matthew, and I have been a geriatric care manager for over 20 years now. And what that means is I assist, well, it's usually the adult child calls me and say, hey, something's going on with mom and dad. They're 85, they need help, they fell, broke a hip, they have dementia. Something happened that changed the parents from I'm fine and I'm independent to now they need help through the end of life. So I've done hospice social work, hospital discharge planning, memory care program director, uh, private care manager in people's homes. So I've kind of seen the inside and outside of this aging process. And so we present this every Tuesday at noon Pacific time through Heartfelt, through to our MSIA and Heartfelt community as a service to prepare you for aging, your aging or your loved one's aging. So you know what's in store, you know how to take care of yourself and your loved ones, and also to let you know that we at Heartfelt are here as a community for you. You don't have to do this alone. There are people that have gone before and know some of the, some of what's around the bend. And so we want to be here for you and provide support. So past Navigating Aging talks are now up online on the heartfelt.org website. If you go to resources and then Navigating Aging with Dr. Cheryl, click on that, you'll see resources and also recordings of past events. So we do record these. So if you don't want to use your name, that's fine. In the recordings, usually they will not have your face. They'll just have the speaker view. So we can keep it confidential that way. But so if you don't want to use your name, just know they'll be posted. So it's up to you. So today's topic is getting our checklist together. The checklist for things to be put into our emergency binder. I don't love the word emergency because I don't like the kind of like the excitement around that. I don't know. There's something I have like I would just like it to call like the planning folder or the just in case folder. So if you think about this folder of things you need if you end up going to the hospital. So when you go to the hospital, say something happens, fall, or you can't get up, things like that. You call 911 or a loved one takes you to the hospital and you arrive there. And to the hospital staff, you are just a blank slate. You are a body sitting, laying there. They know nothing about you, but they do want to help. So this binder of information is like gold to you and them. This is your way to help them help you through this time. So we're going to go through the things that you want to have in this binder. So you'll be well organized and ready for anything. So this will be for you, or if you're working, if you have a loved one you're helping, these are things that you all can get ready. Now, we talked last week about this folder, and we talked about, well, what do you do with this folder? Where do you put it? So if something happens, how does it get with your body to the hospital? So that's going to be, it's a little subjective there because you don't know what's going to happen. But there are some solutions that we'll talk about at the end. And then we'll open up for Q&A and we'll have a good time together. All right. And then Peggy's going to join in too with this and add whatever she likes. She is an amazing resource. She is a fiduciary, just training in fiduciary and also caring for her own loved ones' aging processes. And she has the best book, the emergency book that I've ever seen. She's so organized. So we're going to have her like welcome comments from her. And actually, Peggy has offered to assist people in creating this folder. So I know actually I have one person that emailed me and is interested in already. So I'll talk to you offline about that, Peggy. But just you're not alone with this. So we have resources, and it can be fun. You can do it with a friend. Okay. So first is, and I'll put this list on the heartfelt list. So if you don't write everything down, it's totally fine. We'll have it listed. And there's one resource that's a little bit similar on there already, but we'll put this whole list on there too. So first, you want to have basic information as far as your name, your address, your phone numbers. And you could have a brightly covered cover sheet, brightly covered folder, so it's easy to see for emergency responders. So the first sheets, you want your current medications. And this is really important to keep updated, because when you go in, say if you're on blood pressure medicine, if you're on thyroid medicine, things like that, if you go in with super high blood pressure, they want to know, what are you already taking, for example. So, and keep that list current, maybe check it every 6 months or so. So current medications is an important one. And think of this first section as, if you go to most doctors' appointments and they say, fill out this new paperwork. You fill out this long paperwork as far as what medications are you on, what surgeries have you had, what other diagnosis that you have. Those basic things are things to put in first. So think current medications or supplements, recent hospitalizations, falls, diagnoses, and maybe the year. Like, well, I've been on blood pressure medicine since 2015, for example. And maybe even I've tried this medication, that medication. So I find it valuable if you have sort of a tricky diagnosis that you write down what you've done before and maybe what's worked, what hasn't worked. Any allergies, that's important. Maybe any tests that you've had recently, like if you've had a scan or an MRI or whatever you've had recently. So think of these as puzzle pieces that you know that if the doctors or healthcare staff knew, it would help them help figure out what's going on with you now. Also in that, like any high blood pressure, low blood pressure, any knee replacements, hip replacement, things like that. Okay, second is a contact list. So your names, your family, friends that are involved, anybody that the healthcare team might reach out to. It could be a neighbor, just depends who's your person. So if you have 2 or 3 of these people, then if the first one's not available, the second one, they might be able to call the second person. Lists of your doctors. So maybe it's your primary doctor, your specialist. Also your lawyer, your financial person, and your powers of attorney. So if you have a power of attorney for healthcare, that person that you wrote, if I can't speak for myself anymore for healthcare, that person, talk to Jane. So Jane's contact information. Okay, so third, you want to include any insurance information. So maybe you're on Medicare, maybe you have a supplement, who's your insurance for your prescriptions. So if you can have that information and also a copy of the front and back of those cards, be super helpful. Fourth is a copy of your advance directives. So if you have a healthcare power of attorney, include that. If you have a financial, like a regular power of attorney or general power of attorney for finances, include that. you may think, well, my doctor has a copy of that, or maybe I've been to that hospital before and I've given them a copy. Just consider they don't have it, because usually they won't. So make it easy for them. So if they have the copy of your healthcare power of attorney, if you can't speak for yourself, or if you need assistance at a time while you're in the hospital, they know who to call. And lastly, fifth, if you have any advanced directives, such as do not resuscitate or a PULST, which is a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, which typically happens closer to the end of life, or if you have something going on that you're like, look, I'm not sure, you know, you're vulnerable or fragile in some way. So those are forms that your doctor signs with you. So maybe it says, look, if my heart stops, don't resuscitate, or specifies what kind of life sustaining treatment that you want. So that's the PULST or the DNR. So if you have those things together, copies of those in a folder, so if you're going to the hospital, you bring that with you, you will be ahead of 98% of the people that show up in the emergency room. And what that is going to offer you is timelier care, better communication with your team, your doctors, your powers of attorney. Because what the hospital wants to do, if you show up there, they want to put a Band-Aid on whatever's going on, right? So if they have to take hours doing all these tests, and if they don't have any medication information, or they have no idea maybe why you're not responsive right now, or maybe you're acting a little delirious. Sometimes people show up to the emergency room and it looks like they've got dementia all of a sudden. They can't think straight. Maybe their words are garbled. They're not thinking clearly. They don't know where they are or what their name is. Sometimes that's just dehydration, but they don't know. They might think you've had dementia for a while. So one thing could look like other things. And so if you have all the information and the people to contact, that's going to help you a lot. So I'd love to open it up for questions, comments, and Peggy, if you have anything to share, just feel free to jump in.
I would just like to share one thing as to why I created this. It really came out of years of experience, I guess is the best word, and experience in emergency rooms, both with myself and years before my mother. And I thought, if I were a doctor or nurse, and like Cheryl saying, somebody came in, what would I want to know about them? Because, if they're not feeling well or presented, like Cheryl said, they have to figure out what's going on. That's their side of it. And so all the information that they can get helps them. Particularly the medication is probably the biggest. And then, from then there, like recent surgeries, recent hospitalizations, any conditions, that you may be dealing with. So that's on the doctor's side. On my side, and I have faced this many times, I'm sure most of you have too, both if you've been in an ER and going to a regular doctor, perhaps as a new patient. And that's what I created was I call it my master list of medications, supplements, hospitalizations, surgeries. And so rather than sitting there in a doctor's office and filling out, as I'm sure you all know, this tedious form where they ask you, list all your medication, et cetera, I just hand them this and attach it to that form. And that makes it so much easier on me because, you know, if I'm not feeling well, which has happened, which is why I'm at the doctor, I can't remember all of that. And I just want to say that too, that I have been in the situation of being taken to the emergency room. One was recent, and I handed the nurse that folder with all my stuff. They thanked me profusely because it just made their job so much easier. Not only did they not have to ask me medications, etc., but it had all my insurance, copies of all my insurance cards. And I, you know, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I did this because I can't remember all of that stuff. And I wanted to make it easier for me and easier for the healthcare provider or emergency room. So that's what I wanted to say.
That's great. And also, I want to let you know that this doesn't have to start like, you know, okay, you think like, well, I'm getting older, I might, you know, I'm more of a candidate to go to the hospital. If you start collecting it now as you go, and even think back a little bit, if you can, you know, what surgeries you've had, what conditions you've had, what medications you're allergic to, what medications you've tried, or if you start now, and it's sort of like a resume, you know, when you like as you go, maybe you put like, okay, well, I worked at the diner from this time to this time, and then I worked here and there, and then so as you go, you're kind of collecting that. So when it's time to have a new job, you know your resume is ready, because you might not remember what years did I work at the diner. So same thing with your medication list and your health list. If you do the best you can with keeping that up to date, if something happens, you just have a Google Doc or some way to keep track of it, and you add it to that, so that as you go, so it might not be till 20 years until you need to use that list, but you have it so you don't even have to remember way back when. I've had a couple, I've got carpal tunnel surgery, and I've had a couple foot surgeries, and now, that was back in like 1995 for my foot, and it keeps like that seems so far away. So if I write it down, like I have a list already, so it says 1995, so I don't have to remember that. I just have my list going. Like I said, if it might seem insignificant, but you never know when a little piece of something that you've gone through in the past will help something in the future, like something that comes up, and you'll go, oh yeah, I did that before, or I did this and it worked, I did this or it didn't work. So any of these pieces, as far as medication, hospitalizations, um, surgeries, things like that, and also keep your contact information up, because sometimes you change doctor often or whatever. So some kind of reminder, even if it's once a year, to check your list. Okay. So Karen had a question in the chat. Peggy, do you keep extra copies in case you don't get your folder back?
I do. Yes, I have everything that I did. I have an electronic copy on my computer, and so that's my backup. In case that happens where I don't get it back. In my recent trip to the ER, they actually handed me back my folder, which was kind of nice. I didn't expect to get it back. So anything that I make regarding the topic we're talking about, I make electronic copies of everything so that I always have the record. And I want to say one thing too, Cheryl, on what you just mentioned. On my, what I call my master list, I update it regularly, and I have on the list the date that I last updated it, so that not only I know, but if a doctor looks at it, he goes, oh, you haven't updated this since 1975. It just gives more information.
That's great. And I that's my experience as well as what Peggy just said. When you bring your folder to the hospital, don't expect it back. You may get it back, but don't expect it to return. So just bring copies of things. Okay, you had a suggestion to add to this.
Yes, I do. I have this all written down, all typed up, and on my laptop. But I also have a copy handy here in my home, and for anyone who might need it, should I not be able to talk to them or whatever. I also have given it or sent it or mailed it to everyone that's involved, that would be involved in answering questions or being in with me during care. Everyone who's on my people that are my executors on my will, they have a copy. Everyone that needs to have a copy has a copy. That way, if they come to the hospital, they already know these things, whether they unless they haven't read it, of course, but they could bring it. But basically, it's just make sure that everyone has that information, that it is involved in or would be involved in your care or your life if it's threatened, or if it's if you're uncommunicative. That's been a lot of people don't like getting these from me, but I just tell them to chuck the old one and here's the new one.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. And we'll talk about, okay, so where do you keep these? So like you're saying, because you want them accessible when you need them, but you don't know when you're going to need them. That's the trick. If you knew, then you'd have it. So one excellent idea is to make sure your people have copies. So if you're not able to speak in the hospital and you were, maybe you even had your list taped on the back of the door for the paramedics, emergency, paramedics take this, but they didn't see it. You go to the hospital, and then maybe one of your electronic records has, Barbara is your power of attorney. So they call Barbara. Usually they'll find people, or maybe your friends go, where are you? And they start calling around and they find you're in the hospital. So usually your people will be able to find you, track you down. And then if that person, say your power of attorney, they've got paperwork signed, says you can talk to them about your health care. If they have that packet, they'll be able to answer the questions on the phone for them right away. Oh yeah, I have their medication list. Let me get it to you. It could be even a fax, a scan, take a picture and email it, text it to them. There's lots of ways to get it to the hospital without even needing to carry it in. So, Peggy was saying, you've got yours by the door, right? So labeled like in case, people are inside their house and need the paramedics. Sometimes you could put it by the door. It used to be that they'd say, oh, put it in your freezer and the paramedics would come look there. I don't think that works. But another thing you could do is say this would be if something happens and you're at home, you could call the local fire department and say, if someone calls you and you arrive at my house, where will you look to find my emergency documents? And see what the protocol is of your local fire department. And it might be behind the door. So I'm not sure where else it would be right now. There's no protocol that all paramedics use that I'm aware of. So I would recommend calling them because there's just a couple shifts of paramedics that will be arriving at your door, and they're used to those. They're calling back to bed calls. If someone falls, sometimes they can't get up. They pick them up and bring them back to bed. So they're used to working with, emergency situations. So I'd find out where they would look. So if you're home, you got the paramedics, asking the paramedics where is the best place to put it. Also, if you're not home, your people have copies. You could give a copy to the doctor, but most, if not all times that someone that, like a client of mine has ended up in the hospital, they almost never even contact your regular doctor. It's all handled within the hospital system. The hospitalists that are there, whoever's on call, is trying to put the Band-Aid on you. Potentially, if your doctor is connected with that hospital, sometimes there's maybe calls, but typically not. So if you think, well, my records are with my doctor, don't expect that to be, transferred to the hospital. Who else has a question or a comment or anything? Janine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, where I live, well, I did call the paramedics and ask. I have my direct advancing on my refrigerator,
Okay.
there. And also I took one up to the local hospital because they already have me on file up there, and my medical office because they don't communicate, and gave them, they electronically scanned all that in there. So yeah. And I did have to go to the emergency room back in May, and I have to say, my brain wasn't working at all.
Mm-hmm.
And they already had me in the system, so that was to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. You got some real life experience there.
Cheryl, I'd like to say one thing too on what she just said. I don't know where all of you live, but here I'm in the LA area, San Fernando Valley. The hospitals nowadays, at least the one I go to, they don't scan my records and keep them on file. Now, I don't know if that's just because I'm in an emergency room, and like Cheryl said, they want you in and then let you out. But I even had a procedure at this hospital, and they do not keep records, which really shocked me. And the other thing that I found, I don't know about you all, but medical care has really changed. And one way is something, Cheryl, you mentioned. It used to be, now this is when I took care of my mom, so this has got to be like 15, 20 years ago. She went to the emergency room many times for, mini strokes. And her doctor actually got to leave his office and come into the emergency room. That doesn't happen now. It's like, Cheryl, what you said, which really surprised me. It's like you are treated, well, in my hospital, you're treated by the hospital staff. Your doctor may not necessarily come in. So be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good point. So a lot of times people are surprised by the way our healthcare system works until they get there and they're like, that makes no sense. Like, yeah, I get it. But so now, now that you know some things ahead of time, you'll know how to prepare when you go in. Someone was asking me, should I get I'm like 65, 70, should I get a doctor? I don't really need a doctor. And they may have some like healthcare professionals. I've got my acupuncturist and my naturopath. Do I need a medical doctor to be my point person? Because they didn't really want it, but they had heard that they should. And I told them, what I just told you, that even if you have a doctor, the hospital most likely will not even talk to them. They'll try to band-aid you together and get you whole enough to leave. They'll put a bandage on the wound and get you out so that your regular or your whatever healthcare professionals, when you leave, that you need. So that it's a lot of follow-up, like, okay, go see the wound doctor, and it'll be a new doctor. Go see your cardiologist. Well, maybe, I mean, if you've already had a cardiologist, that usually, like, if you've had a heart condition, and so you have a specialist already. But you're like a regular doctor, they're just going to get the information from the most recent hospital stay after you leave. So they'll say, what did they do? And they probably don't even have the records from your hospital stay. Now I say, what about electronic medical records? There's a few different electronic medical record systems. So some talk to each other and some don't. So if I'm in memorial care, for example, if I've had a test in the memorial care system, that'll probably show up. And my doctor, if they're part of medical memorial, that may show up in their system. But if you end up in the hospital outside of that system, those records may or may not show up in your doctor's office. So my advice to that person was, if you don't need a doctor right now, there's no need, because that person won't be contacted if you're in the hospital, right? It is like a long time ago. It would be almost like, it feels like, I don't know, one of those old shows, whatever that, I can't remember any old shows right now, but like, hey, I've gone to the hospital. And then your doctor picks up their little case and goes, I'm going to go see Jim. He's in the hospital. And goes to your room. That doesn't happen. I mean, maybe it happens in small towns, but it generally doesn't happen in the places that I've seen. The hospital staff, there's hospitalists that say work 4 or 5 days on and then 4 or 5 days off, and they'll come back. So you may see the same doctor 4 or 5 days and they'll be off. So if you're in there past that time, you'll get a new doctor. And then that doctor is your point person for the hospital, and they'll just recommend care when you leave. Beverly.
There we go. Okay, I'm so glad you just, hi.
Hi.
This is good. You may have just answered my question, but I'm going to clarify. So the doctors I have are all holistic, even the MD. So I go to a naturopath that's in an MD's office. The cardiologist I see is an MD, but he is very holistic in his approach. He's more into preventative. The medical records I have on file with Westling's office, the naturopath and holistic doctor, are like 2 encyclopedias long. So, I mean, I'm not going to want to have those copies, but you're saying that they may not even call them anyway. So it kind of just maybe their name and number, and that's about it. Like, you don't really need the files from the current doctors. Was that what you're saying?
Right. That's a good point. So I would just say, I don't think they need the whole file. They probably, the doctors have such little time in the hospital. Really, you want to give them bullet points.
Okay.
I had pneumonia. I had bronchitis. I had a heart attack. I had lightheadedness. I had this.
Okay.
I had that. It started here. We did this. It got better. It started here. We tried this. It didn't get better. Like, just bullet points, because they have so little time that they're most likely, especially if it's like a naturopath, the doctors at the hospital will probably go,
yeah, right.
it's not an M, they may have their attitude, but if you can just give them bullet points and highlights, I would stick with that.
Okay.
So you could keep the records, but I would transfer you said it's a lot of information. I would transfer what you think is important over to this bullet pointed list.
Got it. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay, now on that subject of, like, I tried this worked, I tried this worked. Most of the things that work are holistic, like something they would probably never maybe have heard of, but would never use. So do I even include those? But then it is important because that's when I got better. Or is that just like, I know this is weird. These are weird questions, but it is what I have to deal with.
Yes, I think it's a great question, and I would definitely put in what worked for you, because if you think about it, the doctors, MDs, regular MDs, have just so many tools in their toolbox. They've got what they learned in med school, and from what the work that most of us here on this call have done. Like we have probably researched more, tried new things than probably those medical doctors have.
Right.
So, you know, what they have pills, they have surgery, they have more pills, you know, that, and they have physical therapy. Their solutions are limited.
Mhm.
So if you have had high blood pressure and you go,
Mhm.
hey, the cat's tail supplement has always worked for me. You know, I tried these other
Mhm.
medications. I had these side effects. That didn't work, but I use cattail, you know, 2 tablets, 3 times a day, 5 milligrams, you know, and that works. So say you end up in the hospital and you have this, you know, your power of attorney has this list and you're not thinking clearly. Maybe you're delirious for some reason. Somebody had a stroke and they're not thinking, like they can't communicate this, but your power of attorney is like, oh yeah, she has been on this cat's tail for years. It's always worked for her. I I believe I
Mhm.
believe you could convince the doctor to go, hey, well, let's try that. Because really what they want to do is they want you better and they want you out of the
Mhm.
hospital, you know.
Okay.
So they generally don't want you to sit around and go like, well, let's try these 5 things before we try that. So they may try that, or they could try a couple. They might, you know, they might try what they want first, but it would definitely be worth imparting exactly what works for you. You know, especially if it's something that you've been doing at home that you know works, and maybe you stopped taking it for some reason, or something happened that you know is ending up you up in the hospital. But I would give it to them,
Okay.
and the other thing is, if you can't advocate for yourself, that you want to give your powers of attorney the stack of paper and also communicate with them. If I ever, you know, end up in the hospital or whatever, everybody needs it. Like, you know, remember this cattail thing just totally worked. So then they're advocating for you on the phone if you can't speak for yourself right then. So then your power of attorney could be your voice and your
Okay.
advocate to go, totally, I need, and they might have to sneak you in some cattail. Like, the doctor's like, I don't have that supplement here.
Done that before. Done that before.
So I don't know, you know, that's, you know, they probably wouldn't they don't let you bring things in because they want to
Mhm.
control like what they're giving you. But if you bring it in and talk to them about it, like this usually works. So
Right.
communicating with them is really the key, you know, and they want
Okay.
you to get better. So if you
Right.
have something that's worked. The other
Okay.
thing about past things is a lot of times older people get dehydrated. Maybe they forget to drink as much.
Mhm.
So if they get dehydrated, it could look like all kind of things. Especially it could look like dementia. So if you've got a history of dehydration, and if you have that on your list, that could tell the doctors, you know, check for dehydration first. Well, let's just start there. So they can run the
Mhm.
test to check for that. So that's another example of what um, you know, why it's important to keep your list going, because you may have
Okay.
this common theme. Like for a while, for a couple years, about every 6 months, I was getting like a little cold and it would turn into bronchitis and I couldn't stop coughing. I'd had this cough for like 6 weeks and then I'd have to go on steroids and an inhaler. And so I was keeping track of that. And then I realized, oh, it's allergies around that time. And then I did some work around the allergies, and so then the bronchitis stopped. But it was only because I was keeping track of it, noticed a
Right.
trend, and then I'd go in, you know, I'd go into urgent care, I'm coughing, 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 and the doctor's like, okay, so you know, I'm a blank slate to them, except I go, look, I've had this before. The only thing that worked was this, and they're like, great, let's prescribe that to you.
Okay.
So sometimes you know what you need, and sometimes you need to let them know like what hasn't worked so they can rule out some things, or what you haven't had so they can rule out other things.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Good. That helps. Yeah, that does help.
Yeah.
Um,
And the you know, the checklist that they have, you know, it's so boring to fill out. They're like, I have all this list of medical conditions, and they say like, did you have any of these? Have you ever had any of these before? Have you had, you know, you kind of get tired of
Mhm.
filling out that list. But that information, if you have that on a piece of paper, I've had this, I've had that, my mother died of this, it's a history of this, that helps them put the pieces together to help what's going on now. So those
Yeah.
those things do matter.
Right. Okay, good.
Okay.
I like that idea of like looking at one of those sheets, you know, and then putting that all down before you go anywhere. That's a great idea. And filling that all
Yeah.
out. Okay, one
Yeah.
more quick question. If we have a suggestion about what to sneak in on a topic on your next session, do we just email you?
Yes. If you
Okay.
if you have topics you would like to talk about or us to talk about, yes, if you could email serve@heartfelt.org. Serve,
Okay.
SERVE @heartfelt.org. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay.
Comments,
Okay.
yeah, things at work, topics.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for
Okay,
doing this.
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All
Anytime.
right.
John and Lori. I can't hear you if you're talking, John. You're on mute.
There we
There you
go.
go. There we go.
Yeah.
Hi.
So, hi. Hey, so a little related to the topic that was you were just talking about. The interaction between a primary care doctor and the hospital, which I understand from what you're saying is pretty limited and doesn't really it doesn't sound like it goes on much at the time you're in the hospital. So kind of connecting that to what we were just talking about in terms of what they would view in the hospital likely as alternative care or quackery or whatever, however they might see it. If you want your doctor to be a part, and do you have any experience with that at all? In other words, so it's kind of a multi-part question, like what is the mechanism that has resulted in lack of communication or interaction with a primary care doctor as the way it was in times past and the person in the hospital stay? Is it how much of that is the hospital? How much of that is the primary care doctor maybe not wanting to travel? And what is the fire? So I'm looking at what is the firewall that keeps that from happening. I know with some of the practitioners that have been our primary care doctors who are not MDs, I'm just guessing based on things they've said that they might not feel comfortable going into that environment just because they might be there might be some negative consequences for them and their career. They might be the target of things they wouldn't want to be the target of. And I may be totally making that up, but I think you get the idea of what I'm getting at. And, if they're, going towards, is there a way to have a primary care non-MD interact with your hospital stay? And I'm thinking of, well, it might be Lori, but it could be me too, So, and kind of the answer that I anticipated was that probably all things considered, what you just described in the conversation just before us was that the best way is to have your power of attorney person there doing that. They don't really have as much to lose as a licensed practitioner has, and they can say what you want, what you don't want, and what's worked for you. But rather than just assuming that, I thought I'd just pose that as a question. So sorry if that was long-winded, but that's my.
No, thank you very much. So my experience is that even if it's an MD, if they don't have privileges at that hospital, they really are hesitant to go in. And there's probably very specific rules about that. But when I have had, say, someone has a concierge MD and they can go anywhere, and their person ends up in a hospital, but they don't have privileges there, they can't just go in and tell the staff what to do. So some of that is liability. But what has worked is that if you get I'll just tell you the story of what the most recent example that has worked really well. A person was here in California, Los Angeles. His doctor, concierge doctor, is in New York, but practices in California also. So he ends up in the hospital in California. Doctor's in New York. I'm his care manager, or we'll just call it the advocate at this point, or the power of attorney. I wasn't his power of attorney, but I was helping his power of attorney. I contacted the discharge planner, who is responsible for the communication between the family and the doctors. Because most of the time, it's very difficult to get a doctor on the phone. So I contact that, it's usually a nurse. And I tell the nurse his primary doctor is in New York, and he wants, it was a certain heart medicine, and also he wanted physical therapy after he left. So I had the concierge doctor emailed me, and I also got the discharge planner's email. So the doctor emailed me and copied the nurse about what he wanted as far as adjusting the medication and ordering physical therapy upon discharge. And the nurse was able to get that information to the doctor, and he adjusted. He actually listened to this other doctor. So in the treatment plan, as you know, this particular patient was in the hospital for about 5 days. So the doctor there got to know him, and it was a blood pressure medicine, and say he didn't want to go on a major blood pressure medicine. He just wanted to take an aspirin. So the doctor gave the power of attorney the choice, like, aspirin will do this, blood pressure medicine will do this. What do you want to do? Because the power of attorney had documentation. I can speak for this person because they're not able to. So the power of attorney told the doctor which one he wanted based on what the concierge doctor told him. So it could happen in a alternative medicine as well. So emailing worked well, getting the discharge planner, the head nurse, the email, and then getting the information through them to the doctor has worked well. And the power of attorney was involved, and they could say the power of attorney was getting educated in the background from the concierge doctor, and then the power of attorney was asking for it along with the doctor. So kind of like a multi-force approach, but we were able to get what we needed, even though we weren't saying do this or that, and this other MD wasn't signing off on any charts. We were just suggesting, but that doctor at the hospital was the last say. If this doctor would have asked for something that he didn't agree with, most likely he would not have done it. So it's ultimately the hospitalist decision, but they were encouraged about the care plan given our feedback.
Very
I
cool.
hope that answered your question.
Oh yeah, no, that's a lot of really good practical information, firsthand experience. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Hey, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm doing this on my phone, so it's always like, where are the buttons? Good
Yeah.
to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
So I'm going back to a different question, but kind of question. But as you know, I got sort of a master's degree in dealing with my mother. But the quick
You learned a
class.
lot. You learned a lot. Yes, and yes.
Yes, and I was like, Cheryl, help! That was the first part of the instruction request. So one of the things that I think was a big thing is she had a car accident, and she did have a DNR with what's it called, Kaiser Permanente. You know, whatever, there was a DNR, but she was operated on. You know, like I wasn't, by the time I got out there, she'd already been, and Dottie didn't. You know, Dottie was her care specialist, but nobody got that to her. And I think a lot of my mother's rage after her waking up, that lasted, I think, till she left, was the fact that she didn't want to stay in the first place. I'm just wondering, how do you preempt that? Is there any advice about that for other people? I bring this up from, just because it seemed like an important
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, thanks, Mitchell. That is an important question. And, with this paperwork and what we fill out as far as the advance directives and the living will, telling our power of attorney what kind of treatment we want or don't want, helps most of the time. And then sometimes it just, the end result, sometimes in those situations where care is needed right away, things happen really fast. And
Mhm.
so if they don't have the paperwork or there's misunderstandings with the medical staff, sometimes people don't get what exactly they want. So that's, why it's important to have the conversations with the doctors, with your healthcare attorney, your power of attorney, the person you put in charge of when you can't speak. This person's going to be my advocate.
Right.
So to be as clear, get that written. You said DNR, that's do not resuscitate. So that means if my heart stops, I don't want you to try to start it again. So it sounds like that, that may have happened. The I think the only advice, and I'm sorry that happened, and the only advice I would say is do exactly what we've talked about in this call. Have it on the refrigerator, call the paramedics to say, where should I put this document? Because that do not resuscitate order, DNR, or the PULST is the only thing that paramedics can look at to say, okay, I don't need to do anything. If they don't see that document, they've got to do everything they can to try to revive that person. And if you think, keep in mind that doctors and healthcare staff, their job is to get people better. They want people to survive. Still, even though we've come a long way, still in the hospitals, if someone or a family doesn't bring up, hey, what if we don't do that treatment? What are the pros and cons? What's the outcome? What's the quality of life going to be? Still, and it just surprises me every time, but still they're like, okay, this person needs more treatment. Especially, I've experienced a lot around cancer and radiation and chemo, and let's give them more chemo and let's give them more radiation until, and I just had a neighbor client, but neighbor of a client actually. Anyway, he had cancer, he had throat cancer, he couldn't even swallow anymore. He ends up in the hospital, and they're making plans to put a feeding tube in, and then he just gotten done with some radiation, but it didn't work anymore. So the cancer's back, and he's got this inoperable cancer, and he's so weak, and he just has no quality of life anymore. It really got to the end of the line of what he could do, and he gave it everything. And inside his mind, I think it's like all of us. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I'm aging. I still feel like 27. So the age. So inside his mind, he didn't think, oh, I'm getting older. My quality of life, like this might be the end necessarily. It wasn't making sense to him. And the doctor, when he went into the hospital, the doctor's like, okay, so we're going to put a feeding tube in. You're going to go back to radiation. And with some insurance companies like him, like radiation, you have to drive a half an hour every day to go get this radiation. And he's going to have a horrible quality of life. So nobody gave him all the options. Like, okay, you could do this or you could do that. The only thing they were allowed to talk about is the options of treating. And so I went to the hospital to see him, and the daughter's like, yeah, help me out. What do I do? So I visited with him. He was very uncomfortable in his state. And I talked to the nurse and I asked, what happens if he just wants to go on hospice and not do this other treatment? And as soon as I said that, he's like, oh, then we'd have a different conversation. That's really good that you're bringing that up. Like, he was like waiting for us to say something, but he couldn't say it. So then he's like, okay. So we would bring him home. We discharge him. We could discharge him today. He come home on hospice, have comfort at home for as long as he's alive. Hospice is covered 100% by Medicare. And that's what we would do. And I talked it over with the daughter. The daughter had the the conversation with her dad, like, Dad, look, I'm okay if you go, I'll be okay. I want you to be happy. What do you want? And he's like, no, I'm really done with this. I don't want this quality of life. Got him out of the hospital. He was super uncomfortable, got him home. He was super happy. He lived about a week and he passed away at home. And the only reason that that conversation happened is because I brought it up to the nurses to say, what are the options? So you talk about, this is what happens if you get treatment. This is what happens if you don't. Your choice.
Right.
So, if he has a, do not resuscitate, then he's home from hospice and he has a do not resuscitate order there too, because say the caregivers are caring for him. What happens at 2 a.m. if the caregiver, he starts like having some trouble breathing or he stops breathing and the caregiver panics, calls 911 instead of calling hospice. He calls 911. My dad stopped breathing, or he's pale. What do I do? 911 comes out. And if they don't see that DNR there, they have to do everything they can to revive him. So that's why it's really important to have those documents. Like if someone's in bed, if someone's in bed at home, say on hospice, plaster that DNR right there near his headboard. So the person can't see it. Maybe it's behind him here, but that the paramedics, if they come in, but you train the caregivers, don't call 911 at this point. He's on hospice, call hospice, and the nurses will come out. But
Yeah, I
even
think
then,
there's a lot-
you gotta.
Yeah, I'm listening to all this and I'm thinking there's like a lot of preparation you can do. And then there's like, you can't anticipate what angle people are going to come in from and what the other person, somebody has prepared them. There's just so many things involved. And like with my mom, one of the things for me is it seemed clear to me that this was watching my mother go through this, and like Fellini-esque passage into spirit was, and not all of it was. Some of it was laughable, some of it was like insane. But is that there's a thing called karma that will be faced with as the way we have to go out. So.
Right,
So
it's like the best
there's a lot of
best
you have to
laid plan.
balance everything and
Completely,
acceptance of what's going on. And the
Yes.
fact that nobody saw the DNR may have been part of the karmic flow that happened. And I don't know how you would where do you do the tape that to somebody's back? I mean, how would like an old person know that to have it? Where would they have it? You don't want them walking around with it like on a little
Right.
glass.
You could put it, well, women tend to have a purse with them. I don't have a purse, but a lot of women carry a purse. So if you could put it in your purse or put it in your wallet. Say if someone's out in the town and they fall, paramedics will usually check a purse for ID or check a wallet for ID. So,
Right.
but I completely agree. It's like the best laid plans of man, right? We could try to think of everything, and then we just have to pray for like grace and ease, and then trust. You say, do not resuscitate. You've got that around your neck.
That's what they told me to do here.
Okay. I've never seen that.
Oh yeah, you can order them on Amazon.
Okay.
Maybe you could wear a little
You get a
noose as
DNR. You get a
as
DNR.
symbol.
I think, well, that could lead them to where's your paperwork, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
that necklace alone would help. But that's another thing. Like, look, we just try everything. Something's got to work. And then, like what you said, you best laid plans, and then I just have to trust that person's karma, that person's plan for them, it turns out of what they need. Because if I don't think that, then it's just sad. It's just, like then I'm sad about how things turned out. And this neighbor of mine who's in the hospital, I'm like, oh my gosh, you had this thing, like that's horrible. But I just trust that was just okay for him. And now I can make whatever part as best as I can for what he wants and the best quality of life possible. And he was so
Right.
funny because he got home, he's like, Cheryl, I really want a haircut. So I called up my beautician. I'm like, hey, can you make a house call tonight? Because I know he didn't have long. So she came over that night and gave him a haircut. And actually the day before, the day he was going to leave, He's like, sure, I need my house cleaned. And I was wanting to clean his house for months. I have my cleaning crew go over for months, but he's like, no, I can do it. But he had let it go for a long time because he wasn't very strong. So he's like, he knew that people were going to come over to his house now. So he's like, sure, I need my house cleaned. So I called my housekeeper. They came over and they left just before the ambulance brought him home. And he's like, I need a haircut. So I call my girl. She comes over that night and he's sitting in the chair and he's super weak. And he's sitting there, this big smile on his face. And she's shaving him and giving him a haircut. And he has got this big smile on his face. And he's like, if I knew it was going to be like this nice to go on hospice, I would have done this a long time ago. I was like,
I think I'd like to go on it right now for just
I
for
know.
same time. I feel I need like I'll get that extra pampering
Yes, exactly. Well,
on a
I will,
medi life.
yeah. Well, I pray that you get that pampering right now, Mitchell. So
I agree. Thank
wait
you.
for anything to happen.
You know, when you said about we're all getting older, and I'm like looking at my face in my own Zoom room, and I remember that my dad used to say, "Who the fuck is that guy in the mirror?"
Right. Exactly.
The joy of
Nice.
aging.
It's nice to see. It's nice to see you in the Zoom window. So
I finally
yes,
made it. I've been
thanks.
watching these show up in my email, so finally had the day for it. Well, God bless, and thank you
Thanks for
for
joining.
what you're,
God bless you.
what you've given before and now.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're gonna wrap it up. Do you have a wanna take us out, John? Got a final comment? Oh, Kevin too. You're frozen. We'll go to Kevin. I think John's frozen.
Hey, yeah, this is great conversation. And just one thing, I learned something here, which is maybe, you said about dehydration. A lot of times older people are just dehydrated. So I'm thinking maybe I'm really like 39, but I'm just dehydrated, and that makes me 63.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah. So I'm drinking a lot of water.
Water. It's good.
Yeah.
Water's good for you. I love that. I love that.
So love and light
That's,
to everybody. It's really great service. Thank you, Cheryl.
Reminder
Yeah,
to
cheers.
everybody to drink lots of water. Keep moving. Drink water. Choose to be happy. That's a good thing.
You stay drunk on water all the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Peggy, for adding such grace and beauty to this. And I love you all. We're here for you. Serve at heartfelt.org. You get topics, questions you want to talk about next time. We'll see you next Tuesday. And the recordings are online if you ever want to check them out. Love you all.
Love
Thank
you.
you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.